Buerkle.
Thank you, Dr. Farr. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be back at Georgetown. I have 6 children, and one of my daughters graduated from Georgetown in 1997. And then to give you an idea of how quickly time goes by, I was here just a few short months ago with my oldest granddaughter, and we had a lovely tour of Georgetown. So it's wonderful to be back at this very fine institution. And I'm so glad to be here this morning to talk about a topic that really is so important to our nation. What was not mentioned in my bio was that I am a registered nurse also. So I was a nurse for many years and then went to law school and represented a large teaching hospital as an attorney for many years. So I really spent the bulk of my professional life in healthcare. So it's something that I'm passionate about, I care deeply about. And I think really the place to start the discussion is that we as Americans all agree that we need healthcare reform in this country. And then the question becomes, what will that healthcare reform look like? It will be interesting to flesh out the Supreme Court's decision later on this morning, and certainly I hope we can have an opportunity to discuss it today. But the question that our nation faces is, what do we want our country to look like? And I think the HHS ruling is a very integral part of that discussion. Our country, and if we look at the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers gave us a moral imperative. It's a moral promise to this country that we have unalienable rights, and among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They promised that if we adhered to those principles and understood that our rights and all of the rights we enjoy were God-given and didn't come from the government, that we would be a prosperous nation. The problem with, and one of the reasons I ran for Congress, I'm a freshman in 2010, was my opposition to the health care law, knowing we needed reform, but not understanding why we would put the government squarely between the physician and the patient and the health care decisions. So as a result of that, I ran for Congress, and I've looked at this and just taken this so seriously. But this whole debate about our nation and what the government's role is, it's not to grant us those rights as we see in the HHS ruling. It's to protect those rights. Those rights belong to us. The right of conscience belongs to us because it is God-given. And the only role of the government is to protect that right. And so when we get into a situation with the HHS rule, which is now granting us rights, we as a nation we've done a 180, and we've come so far away from what the experiment was that caused the greatest nation in the history of the world to exist, the United States of America. So that, I think, is really what is so serious and what's so profound about both the Health Care, the Affordable Care Act, as well as this conscience provision. One of the most essential, as a health care provider, one of the most essential pieces of practicing health care and being a provider is that you can respect and the system respects your deeply held beliefs. This HHS rule eliminates that. It is the most invasive government into our privately held beliefs and our conscience, and is of concern to me both as a healthcare professional, but more broadly as a nation, and what we want our nation to look like, and what we've come so far as to what this nation stands for. The understanding, again, that we have those rights, those deeply held rights, because God gave them to us, and government's only role, the only role, is to protect those rights, not to grant those rights. I want to just mention one other issue that has come up this year, and the HHS rule was the beginning and certainly the most pervasive, but in Oversight and Government Reform Committee we had another hearing. It had to do with the United States Catholic Conference with regards to a grant they receive every year because they do such an outstanding job at sex trafficking and human trafficking throughout the world. They have several programs. But because the Catholic Church and the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops would not refer for abortion services or sterilization, they were not given that grant. So it's yet another example of how far we have come away from protecting the conscience, those deeply held beliefs. And I would, just concur with my colleague Jeff, and I take him, I just want to honor him this morning and just commend him on the leadership he has taken with HR 1199 and putting it out here and articulating the very important conscience provisions that we should have as Americans. But getting back to the human trafficking, so the United States Catholic Conference was not given that grant money, and it was given to organizations who were willing to refer for abortions and sterilizations. Again, asking or penalizing the Catholic Church because it would not violate its conscience and its deeply held beliefs. That's where we're at as a nation. And so as we go forward and we look at elections, we look at the big picture down to the HHS rule, it is really a question of what we want our nation to look like. Do we want our government granting us rights, or do we want our government in the very appropriate role of just protecting our rights? And the HHS rule and the overreach of the federal government, it's really probably the most serious. And I say it in my town halls, and I must tell you that folks in my district are so concerned about this, whether you're a healthcare provider or just the constituents. Any religions, and we've had hearings on this as well, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, those who don't, are without faith, that the government would begin to tell you what you have to believe or not believe or violate your rights of conscience. And I will just end with just a practical example. In addition to the overall concern about the overreach of the government, I have a large Catholic teaching hospital. It's where I trained as a nurse in my district. And I had a conversation with the administrator, and she said, here's the situation with this HHS mandate. We are a self-insured hospital. We have a lesser, smaller plan. We have about 8 subscribers where they deal directly with the insurance company. If the HHS mandate is upheld, and we have to go through with that, we will have to shift all of our employees out of the self-insured plan and into direct contact, and they'll have to get their insurance directly from the insurance company. She said their premiums will be significantly higher. They will lose the benefit of having us be self-insured and just have our insurance administered. So that's the economic. That is a very small piece, and I'm sure there's examples all over that when you ask an institution to violate their deeply held beliefs, there are going to be intended consequences, but there also will be unintended consequences. And in a law that was supposed to improve access and reform health care, we're going to end up with folks paying higher premiums and having less access to their health care. So again, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Dr. Farr, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you.